We're starting today a 5 series episode on lessons from Hindu history with none else than Sandeep Balakrishna. And today we have two invaluable lessons. What exactly we have? To know that, please subscribe and also look at the links which are there in the descriptions, including the contribution link as well as the social media links. Let's go. So, welcome viewers and namaste, Sandeep ji.
Namaste, Sanjay ji.
So, swagatam
Thank
on
you.
Jaipur Dialogues once again.
Dhanyavada.
And we have this old truism that says that if you don't learn from history, then you're condemned to repeat it. I think that appears to be very, very true, and even more tellingly so in the Indian context. And that is why we need to drum into the people the lessons from Hindu history. So, what's your take on this?
Well, what is my take? Except to say that I agree with you 100%. We are condemned to repeat history because we don't learn anything from it. And this is another truism, which is also true. That no matter how many times you say the same quote, it remains true.
It remains. Yes, it
Yeah,
remains.
more so in the case of Hindu history.
Yes, we can see that same secular politics getting repeated that led to the partition of India.
Correct. Hmm.
So, what are those 10 lessons that you're going to tell us? And what are the, okay, we have 5 episodes in this series. So,
Mhm.
that means 2 lessons per episode. So, what are the 2 lessons that you're going to talk about today?
Right, like your flyer and poster said, out of these 10 lessons, the 2 lessons that we can cover in this episode is the first lesson is what we call the loss of the Aryavarta consciousness, and the second lesson is the lack of correct or accurate identification of a new enemy that uh, Hindus were hitherto not confronted with. And unfortunately, this correct identification, this lack of correct identification, that problem still persists in the larger Hindu psyche. They can only
And
see the
what are the
stations.
events that form the context?
Yeah. So okay, we'll divide this first episode into two major historical events that happened. Okay,
Okay.
which also sets the, like you said, the context for these 2 lessons and for whatever the rest of the episodes that will follow. So the first context obviously is the Islamic invasion of Bharatavarsha for the first time.
Right.
That, as everybody knows, that begins with Muhammad bin Qasim's raid on Sindhu Desha, Sindhu Pradesha, basically. So that is the first one. It is actually a raid. It is not a conquest by any meaning of that term. And the second major episode happens nearly 300 years after Muhammad bin Qasim's raid. That is the disastrous invasion, actually. It is actually an invasion, a full-fledged invasion by Mahmud of Ghazni, which is in Afghanistan. And, the parallels are chilling, actually, even as we, kind of look at what is happening in Afghanistan today, at the moment, even as we speak. So the historical parallels are just incredible. It is chilling, actually. So this is the broad two major events that form the broad context, historical context for what we will discuss in today's episode.
Right. So, let's start with the first one.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. So, why do you say that we lost the Aryavarta consciousness in terms of the
Mm.
first raid of
Mhm.
Muhammad
Mm.
bin Qasim? Because we know ultimately he was chased away Did not stay here very long,
Yeah.
and a lot of kingdoms did get together under
Mm-hmm.
Bappa Rawal and others, and the
Mm.
Gurjars, and they chased him
Mm.
out right to the borders of Arabia.
Mm. Mm. Right. So let's begin with what we call as Aryavarta consciousness. So for that, let's begin by defining what Aryavarta is. Most of the people know, but for those who came late, how did Indians regard, how did Hindus regard our geography? I mean, Diana Ek has written a book called India, the Sacred Geography, which is a very telling title for a book on India. She could have called it anything. She calls it India, a Sacred Geography, which means these people, Westerners, have studied us so well, better than we have studied ourselves in the modern time. So, this sanctity of a geography is perhaps unique in any civilization that since the dawn of humankind, so to say. So this element of deep-rooted sanctity, no other country has so many, tirtha kshetras, pilgrimages, as much as India has. That everybody knows. There's a reason for this, and it is timeless. It dates back to, the Vedic times, perhaps. That's where everything, India was born with that, in a way. So from that perspective, when we ascribe sanctity to our geography, what does it mean? How did we call it? How did we regard it? First, before we get to Aryavarta, how did we define our sacred geography? So, for example, Manu, he defines Aryavarta and Brahmavarta as that land, that Deva Bhumi, that lies between the Himalaya mountains and the Vindhya Parvata, from the Bay of Bengal, that is the eastern sea, to the western sea. Okay, that is what Manu calls as Aryavarta. Arya tam deva nirmitam bhumim brahmavartam prachakshate. Okay, that is the latter part of the shloka. And most Puranas, even Ramayana, Mahabharata, all are sacred literature. All of them, they regard this land as a divinely blessed land, and rightly so. But we won't get into that. So from that derivation of this, Aryavarta. Arya means noble and virtuous. Okay. Aryavarta. Avrata. Vrata means the land that is encompassed by this, by noble people, by Aryas. Okay, so that is Aryavarta. That is, and as Sanatana culture kept spreading, everybody wanted to be part of this Aryavarta. So it bestowed nobility by its very being. Okay, and wherever these noble people were there, that is Aryavarta. So this, and
But,
that
but
is,
why do you say between Himalayas and the Vindhyas? Because the Vishnu Purana definition is much wider.
yeah, it is much wider, but Vishnu Purana was written much later than the Manusmriti.
Okay.
Okay, that's what I said. As Sanatana culture, the borders of Sanatana culture kept spreading. The whole India was regarded as Punya Bhumi. It still is. So this culture of nobility, nobleness, virtue, and all of Bharata Varsha itself is taken together, can be called one large Yagna Bhumi. Okay, so this was broadly, the conception of our geography as Aryavarta, sacred geography, Aryavarta, noble geography, virtuous geography, divine place, blessed by the devas and, divine beings. So that became the pulse and impulse which shaped whatever India has remained till date. This you can see in all our festivals, in almost in every aspect of Hindu culture. This innate DNA, this consciousness, civilizational and cultural consciousness, we still retain that. It has not been diluted even one bit, except that we don't do this consciously. Okay, that is one. So this broadly is the whole conception of Aryavarta. Second, how did writers of Dharma Shastras, Artha Shastras, Kautilya, for example, he defines all of India. He defines all of India as a Chakravarti Kshetra.
Okay.
Okay, meaning the land of Chakravartis or emperors. And this conception of a Chakravarti It was present in the mind of every king and an aspiring king. He had to be a Chakravarti, which means he had to put his neck on the line physically. It was not just an establishment of some kind of empire or, some bloodthirsty kind of a thing. No, it was a yajna. It was a Raja Yajna, Rajasuya Yajna, Rashtra Yajna. So this was our impulse. This was our civilizational impulse. And why should a Chakravarti, why should any king aspire to be a Chakravarti? Again, in order to uphold Dharma. Okay, in order to make sure that all the 4 ashramas and varnas, whatever, I don't want to get into the political connotations, both varnashrama dharma, go brahmana samrakshana, a Chakravarti would become a Chakravarti to maintain all this. Okay, this was the consciousness that animated this entire civilization for at least more than 3,000 years till the Arab raid of Sindh happened. As long as India followed, as long as Hindu culture followed Kautilya's path, as long as it followed Shri Krishna Paramatma's path, this consciousness remained intact. But you know how things panned out later in history, that Hindu kings kept cutting each other's throat. Okay, the 10th century is a turning point, but we'll get to that later.
So
Okay,
let me just try and understand this a little
Yes.
better.
Okay.
Because Dharma, as we say, the code of duty, is basically based on, as I understand, is the performance of, or rather the discharge of your debts, the Pancharana concept. And in the course of the discharging those Pancharanas, the Chakravartis or the emperors, they have their own debts to discharge. Am I right?
Broadly, yes. Actually, when you say dharma, it is the pancharana. Okay. Devarana, Rishiruna, Pitrana, all that. Okay. The pancharanas is just one part of dharma, because dharma itself is all encompassing and it also has a context. So there are 2 parts to dharma. Dharmasya sthitihi, dharmasya gatihi. Meaning the state of being, that there is a changeless and permanent eternal aspect to dharma, and there is a dynamic aspect to dharma. The dynamic aspect of dharma shows up, it changes according to, because society is not static. Notions of morals and ethics and customs and other things, family, whatever, because that never remains constant. It is like a river.
Right.
That is why dharma has also been compared to river.
Right.
So that is the gati aspect of dharma. So you have to regard this word, this term, in an all-encompassing sense, right? So there is no fixed in worldly life, what is known as secular life or worldly life. This aspect of dharma is highly contextual. Okay, then there is also this, a period of stability where dharma, it rules and whatever it is maintained. The sthiti is maintained for a while, and then things go out of fashion. New generations emerge, new knowledge is discovered, and suddenly, when even during peacetime, there is a great a threat that emerges. That time you have something called apad dharma, the dharma of exigency or emergency, where all the regular rules of dharma are suspended just to fight off or meet this exigency. So that's why I said that the scope of dharma is totally all encompassing, and we have to do a separate session on these things, but one lifetime is not enough to understand how these things actually pan out. Okay, it is not just at an intellectual or spiritual or philosophical level. Like I said, it applies everywhere. Anyway, so that apart, coming back to that question, kings, for example, kings had multiple dharmas. The first and foremost was Raja Dharma, the dharma of being the protector. Protector of what? Of dharma itself. So you see how the circle completes right then and there. Okay, then he also had other regular dharmas of being a kshatriya, of being a husband, and the rest of the things. He also had to discharge his rinas, right? So this is how, all these impulses animated us and kept us alive as a culture and civilization. So this, more above all, we were always conscious of our immediate geographical borders, which is why we never went out and invaded. When Swami Vivekananda says it's good, okay, we agree with all that, that India was the only country which never went out and invaded anybody, which is fine at one level. But why? Because we had everything here. Nature has been extraordinarily kind and highly partial to India. Okay, so anyway, so I mean, I'm just digressing all over the place, but coming back, the
Yeah,
point is,
come back to the loss of this Aryavarta
yeah,
consciousness. Now that we
that's the,
know what exactly Aryavarta consciousness is,
yeah. So
let's
this was
talk about
Aryavarta.
the loss
Yeah,
of this Aryavarta
yeah.
consciousness.
This was Aryavarta consciousness, which means that each time there was a kind of a threat, external, internal, whatever threat, there was some calamity. The belief from the Puranas, from our, other Rajya Shastra, whatever it is, the belief was that one Chakravartin, one Parashurama, one Krishna, people like that would take birth in this land and make it Aryavarta again. But what these Hindu kings lost over the centuries was that these births of Parashurama and Krishna and all these things, however great they are, they don't occur in a vacuum. So this Kautilya understood that a strong state should also be manned by extreme ruthlessness. Otherwise, you can't keep it. Otherwise, see, Kautilya built a highly centralized state, and also delegated Chandragupta Maurya, his network of vassals and feudatories were extraordinary, because he maintained it with an iron hand. We lost that. That is the loss of this Aryavarta consciousness. That we knew what united us culturally. We knew our borders, the extent of our borders, but how to maintain them, how to maintain kingdoms so that they are not threatened externally, is something we lost due to infighting. This is the loss of what I call Aryavarta consciousness in
Uh,
its practical manifestations.
yes, we know that. Okay, but what do you think that someone like Bappa Rawal, whose history we have studied within this period,
Hmm.
not only he went out of these borders, out of the sacred geography, but
Hmm.
his impulse was
Hmm.
to actually build fortifications outside and build some kind of outpost outside, so
Hmm.
that he would preempt any kind of an attack. And
Correct.
that kind of lasted for a pretty long time, as you say, almost
Hmm.
300 years.
Yeah.
And after Mahmud of Ghazni, then there was this
No,
Salar Masood, his nephew, when he went inside the Gangetic Plains,
Hmm.
he was defeated and ruthlessly dealt with
Hmm.
by
Hmm.
Suhail Dev.
Yeah.
He actually gave measure for measure.
Hmm.
He gave them the same kind of brutality that they were
Hmm.
giving to the Indians, and that kept India safe for another 150 years.
Okay.
So where did we lose all that?
Okay. So let me ask a counter question, just to kind of broaden the scope of discussion and to clarify it. Who were Bappa Rawal's contemporaries in the south, in Madhya Desha, to his east? Who were his contemporaries?
Well, we had the Cholas and Chalukyas at that time.
South.
Like
Okay. Okay.
towards the south,
East.
the
Hmm.
Gurjars in
Pratihara,
the
Gurjara
uh,
Pratihara.
Gurjar Pratiharas in the
Hmm.
Gujarat area,
Gujarat,
Gujarat
Madhya
Kutch
Pradesh.
area,
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Hmm.
of course a number of Rajput
Hmm.
feudatories within Rajasthan.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, they all acted together. One
Hmm.
must say that to their credit.
Well, that's a very rare instance. So, what was Bappa Rawal's timeline roughly?
That is what is called uh, post bin Qasim.
Hmm.
That's
So
post bin Qasim.
between bin Qasim and Mahmud of Ghazni. Okay, so we lost the Aryavarta consciousness by the time Mahmud of Ghazni was taking charge at Ghazni, Ghazana or Ghazni, right? So
Or
in
before
those,
that, we also had the fall of the Hindu Shahi kingdoms, no?
precisely. So the downfall of Kanauj, 𝐾𝐜𝐲, after Harshavardhana, that, see, the Kanauj Empire, it was formidable, both in its geographical spread and its military power. Few people underestimate, I mean, today are aware of the kind of power it wielded throughout, northwestern India, throughout North India, northwestern India, all the way up to Afghanistan. Kanauj acted as this, huge support base for Hindu Shahis. See, that is the whole point. So we lost this Aryavarta consciousness, which is why after the fall of Kanauj, after the fall of Harshavardhana, Sri Harsha or Harshavardhana, you had a
No, no,
series of,
Shri Harsha is a Kashmir king. Harshavardhan is the
I
Kannauj.
mean, we call it Sri Harshavardhana. Sri Harsha is also a poet. So anyway, so
No,
he's also a Sanskrit poet. So anyway,
yeah, no,
so
Shri Harsha is also one feudatory of the
territory of Kashmir, yeah, he was accused of destroying some
feudatory of the
yeah,
Muslim kings in
Muslim
Kashmir.
kings. Yeah, he is also accused by Romila Thapar of destroying a Shiva temple. So leave it. So anyway, the point is that after the downfall of Sri Harsha and Pulikeshi down in the south, okay, after that, in just 300 years, and especially in the 10th century, three major empires rose up and started fighting among each other: Gurjara Pratihara, Rashtrakuta, and the other guys, I forget the name. So three major empires, I think not Palas, no, not Palas. Three major empires, they fought each other needlessly, senselessly. It, in fact, to their eternal discredit, Rashtrakutas opened up horse trading, literally horse trading, trading in war horses with Arab Muslims. They allowed they were one of the first kings, Hindu kings, to allow these Arabs to build mosques in their own territory. Who does this? This is what I call loss of Aryavarta consciousness. So anyway, coming back to this downfall of Kanauj, Hindu Shahi kings were on their own. They were on their own, defenseless, no backup, nothing. Right. So this Baparaval thing, the last time Hindus actually united was against Anandapala. He's the son of Jayapala, who was the last frontier Hindu hero. His son, Anandapala, he became Mahmud's feudatory, but then he also declared independence and said, look, I'm going to finish you off forever. That was when he sent out embassies to at least 91 Hindu kings and chieftains and feudatories. 91. And they all responded. Ajmer, Kalinjar, that is Bundelkhand, all the way, okay, Jaipur, Ajmer, all these places, and they responded enthusiastically. And this is what a Muslim chronicler, okay, he writes about the kind of battle that Anandapala and his forces gave. I'll read that out. It's actually amazing. So let me read that out. Just a second. Yeah. So he says,
Name?
Hindu women sold their jewels and sent the money from distant parts
Name of the
of.
chronicler?
Who was Mahmud's chronicler? Yeah, I forget his name. I don't want to be wrong. I think Minhajus Siraj. I think maybe. I mean,
Minhasu Siraj?
maybe. I mean, this account is there everywhere, but it was first
Okay.
chronicled by Mahmud's chronicler. So this is what he writes: Hindu women sold their jewels and sent the money from distant parts of Hindustan to be used against the Musalmans. The poorer class worked feverishly at the spinning wheel or as hired laborers to be able to send something to the men of the army. Their goal was to uh, expel the Musalmans from Hindustan and forever and safeguard their ancient religion. This is what a Muslim chronicler writes. I'll send you the reference later. Okay? So we lost that Anandapala. So 10th century again. 10th or 11th century, beginning of 11th century. So why did this happen? This happened simply because of two reasons. Now we come to lesson number 2. Okay. Because we lost Aryavarta consciousness, we were unable to identify the precise nature of the new enemy. all the previous invaders into India till Muhammad bin Qasim were what you call pagans, beginning from Alexander. Okay, the Huns, I mean, they were barbarians, but neither of the, I mean, their religion was not Christianity or Islam. That much is known. Kushanas, same thing, right? So they, this kind of fanatical, barbarism sanctified by scripture. That's what Islam is. That was missing. So India was resilient enough, it was powerful enough, the Aryavarta consciousness was strong enough to absorb all these foreign elements and make them Hindu. Okay, you can make a, that inscription in Madhya Pradesh, the Greek inscription. There's a pillar there built.
Yeah.
It starts from H, I think. I forget the name anyway. So it is.
I think.
Yeah, correct. So that is the one. So we had that capacity. Why? Because we still retained that Aryavarta consciousness, and because we were, largely what you call this kind of. We were not used to this kind of introduced to this kind of barbarism, religion sanctified barbarism. Okay, this is what precisely did us in. And even after Qasim did what he did, okay, he was enabled foolishly by a bunch of Buddhists. Okay, R.C. Majumdar writes, for many years they had carried on treacherous correspondence with Al-Hajjaj. Okay, the governor of Iraq. Yeah. So all these, I mean, what does it show? You're not careful. You don't even understand the nature of this new enemy. Right? What compels them? Military conquest is one thing. We were used to these military conquests and, usurping, this Digvijaya Yatras that Hindu kings did. None of them harmed their dharma in the process. They didn't kill cows. They didn't destroy temples. So why should a military victory? What kind of?
They didn't even harm the non-combatants.
Precisely. This is what I think Megasthenes, some Greek records write, that villagers, farmers on the countryside, in the villages, a war would be waging, in their eyesight. Okay, soldiers would be fighting in their line of sight. They would be unharmed. Okay, so they would be happily, doing their harvest or planting their crops or doing whatever, and war would be going on right next door. So what kind of warfare is this? None of our kings or statesmen or even lawgivers, dharmashastrakaras, none of them studied this. Even today, this is a curse of the Hindu psyche. What compels?
Well, I'm not sure that if whether people understand it even today, the nature of the beast, the nature of the enemy.
Yeah,
the Purva Paksh seems to be lacking even today, and in fact,
more so today.
I had a counterpoint just the other day coming from some very learned, educated people. Saying that, hey, you can't say that, and it's not like this, and Islam is not like this. And you actually quote from their scriptures, you can quote from their tafsir, and they will still be in denial.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think one of the major reasons why we suffered, according to me, I've been saying this ad nauseum, is that we forgot to do our Purva Paksha. We forgot that the nature of war has changed and the total war doctrine had been brought in. And the total war doctrine was not understood by us and not given a strong enough response, as a result of which it completely demoralized the non-combatants.
Correct. Absolutely. So this is the second lesson, briefly, that, incorrect identification of the true nature of the new enemy. Okay, it's a new enemy, and the motivations are totally different. You know what? Something, I was doing some research, and here's a pointer for a deeper and broader research. For anyone who's interested in that. After, Muhammad bin Qasim, after his raid into India, he introduced this, total war concept. Okay, But that did not take firm roots simply because he did not stay here for a long time. 3 years and he was back to Iraq, where he was tortured and killed in a very brutal fashion, which is okay. The point is, okay, fine. That's a very early point, so you can perhaps give an excuse the Hindu ignorance of understanding this new enemy. But 300 years later, the same ignorance, and especially after what Mahmud of Ghazni did, for the first time, he, apart from destroying our temples and slaughtering cows and the rest of the atrocities, what he did was to amass slaves. He introduced Islamic concept of slavery in India. Okay, Lahore, for the first time, Lahore emerged on the world map as a slave market in the wake of Mahmud's invasion. So people write, he flooded all his expeditions into India, jihads into India. It was so brutal, and he captured so many slaves that they became the price of the slave market price simply imploded. There are imbalance in the slave market in Bukhara, in Iraq, in Middle East, as far as Egypt. Indian slaves, former Hindus, they would have been rich businessmen here, coming from respectable families, reduced to cleaning somebody's toilet, getting beaten, pulling oil, drawing water from the well, picking up huge stones, doing construction labor, and being employed in some harem of some filthy sheikh. In lakhs, Indian slaves, Hindu slaves, kind of distorted the economics of slave market in Central Asia because of this one man. Make a study of this. You can go back, trace some of the DNA if somebody is interested to do this. You'll be surprised how many were former Hindus. So if you don't, and this kept happening repeatedly. So don't you even have the common sense to, correctly identify the source of this sort of behavior? You can't call them brutes. Brute is an animal, basically, which acts by instinct. This is beyond that. This is far worse than, any descriptions of Rakshasas in our Purana. So what motivates them? What is it that, impels them and compels them to do this kind of thing? Not during wartime, even today, during peacetime. Okay, so this is the second major lesson that we see, and this occurred 300 years after Qasim's raid of Sindh. So one by one, all these Hindu kingdoms, because of this, they failed to unite. So they had this whole thing, right? They forgot Kautilya. He was largely forgotten till the 14th or 16th century also. And even then, he was not taken really seriously. Like he wasn't, his political philosophy did not become mainstream for so many centuries. You want to do Krishna Leela, you want to do, write commentaries on Bhagavad Gita, but you fail to understand why he called Kurukshetra as a Dharma Kshetra. Kurukshetra is a geography. Why does Bhagavad Gita start with Dharma Kshetre, Kurukshetre? Why does it call it a Dharma Kshetra? Because Yuddha Dharma is also Dharma.
So my point in this is that while we discuss this, and it glaringly stands out that all our philosopher and wise people, they do not seem to have studied the Islamic scriptures on the basis of Islamic ideology, the trilogy, or what we call the Sharia trilogy, until the 19th century. Do you have any instance where it has been studied before that? Before
None
Dayananda
whatsoever.
Saraswati, is there anyone who studied this?
Until Dayananda Saraswati, nobody did this. Nobody did this. Unfortunately, but
That is the most colossal, I should
yes,
say, the most
blunder,
colossal intellectual failure.
failure. Totally agree. Completely agree. See, like I said, this confederacy of Hindus that happened under Anandapala's, last and final resistance. That kind of national unity has not been seen again at all throughout our history, even today. That kind of Hindu unity was never witnessed. That was the first and the last. As far as our encounters with Islam is concerned, that was the first and last. But even then, they came to eject this unclean Mlecha. Why? Because he killed cows, he defiled women. This Mlecha, this Turushka, not even Turushka. Then he was not a Turushka. They were Arab Muslims. So they destroyed our temples and murtis and vigrahas and everything. So they saw these outward manifestations, not the ideology, not the scripture that gave rise to this behavior. So it was like, on one level, it was, to safeguard and, rebuke and, give a strong counter militarily to these mlechas. But that basic dharmic understanding that comes, to analyze your enemy correctly. Kautilya had no such qualms. He had no such confusions. Okay, remember that he came at a time of Alexander's invasion, right? So he understood one thing very clearly, that our borders are sacred. That these guys who come from outside, they follow no rules. They don't follow our dharma, which means you don't fight at night. One example, small example. You cannot fight at night. Okay, until a war has been officially declared, you don't take the enemy by surprise. These were well-known rules of warfare, which Hindus recognized. People of this land, they recognized. Okay, so none of this. Kautilya saw that these buggers adhere to none of that, and that if they took political power, they would impose their brand of unclean, adharmic notions and ideas and rule into India. So, which is what he said, look, enough is enough. We need a strong central state. He had no confusions in this. So, I mean, in Chanakya serial of Mr. Dr. Dwivedi, so there's a beautiful line. Okay, he says, Alexander will not see you as आपको मद्रगण नहीं देखता, आपको मागध नहीं देखता, आपको माल नहीं देखता, आपको ऐसा नहीं देखता, आपको हिंदू ही देखेंगे. So you can say you are a Magad, you can say you are from Bihar, you are from Rajasthan, and from Karnataka. For the alien invader, you are all the same. You are the heathen, you are the kafir. So Kautilya had no confusions regarding this basic fundamental understanding.
Well, we did not seem to learn much, because I think all these confusions persisted in someone like M.K. Gandhi.
We have not learned anything at all. Even, I make no apologies for saying this. Even somebody like Swami Vidyaranya, who played such a huge role, foundational role in, rescuing, safeguarding Sanatana Dharma in South India. Okay. Even he did not study Islamic scripture. He was also a great Shastragna.
And you have that instance of the Vijayanagar Empire, where Aliya Ramaraya used to keep next to his throne another throne with Quran on it. If he had only studied it, then maybe he would not have committed that mistake which led to the loss of Battle of Talakot.
Yeah. No, even before Aliya Ramaraya, a lot of soldiers, Muslim soldiers, were already in Vijayanagar army. Even Krishnadevaraya had many, dealings with many Muslims. See, the founding of Vijayanagar Empire and, the first 100 years, the first century of 100 years, a golden chance, especially under Devaraya II, I'm sorry. There was a golden chance for these guys to permanently smash the Brahmanis. That they never did. And you see this failure repeatedly. Why? Again, it comes back to the same thing. Proper accurate, unambiguous, unerring identification of this new enemy. They didn't do it then, they haven't done it even now.
And it's not being done even today.
Even today. No, it is done. I mean, the awareness of these guys of that cult and that ideology is fairly well known. The awareness is there, but it is not translating into what you call a cohesive action, either intellectually or otherwise.
I think you touched that point fairly well in your book, that 70 years of secularism. I think you
Yeah,
could probably uh, cite a few instances from there.
yeah. So, the unfortunate reality. Too bad. We are experts at committing civilization and suicide because of this one fundamental point.
And I would actually add, in fact, that if you see in the contemporary Indian scene, you see that this consciousness seemed to have captured the people, because when they threw out the Congress in 2014, the people seemed
Hmm,
to have
hmm.
embraced that consciousness, and because of which they threw the aliens out.
Alien rule, yeah, alien rule.
They
Yeah.
threw the aliens out
Yeah,
by the democratic means.
means, yeah.
But the expectations that they had from the people whom they put in command,
Mm-hmm.
they do not seem to have understood that they have come to this power not because of any economic failure of the aliens, but because the people want a civilizational change. Do you think that lesson has actually dawned upon the new rulers?
That's a bit of what you call you're being a bit too harsh on this current regime. Is that's what you. If, things are working actually in that direction. Things are working. It's not that overnight you come and say this is grants the Hindu revival. Simply because you don't live in era where let's say for example, uh, we'll take the Battle of Raichur, famous
Okay.
Battle of Raichur. Okay, Krishna Devaraya. He vanquishes that Adil Shah, whoever that Muslim king is. He chases him all the way, physically occupies Raichur city, which means the entire dominion of that Bahmani king is his now, right? But he does not molest anyone there. And the scene is sketched out beautifully in great detail. And even the Muslims of Raichur, they prostrated before the king's army and the victorious king's army, and they said, look, whatever you say we'll do, and this and that. So to that extent, that is no longer possible. So Dharma was re-established in Raichur, so to say, in a summary fashion. Okay, you can't do that now. You see where I'm getting at? How do you do that now? There are systems, there are all these. Look, let me simplify it for you. And this is not my original claim. Very early, okay, even in the early days of freedom struggle, all our proper scholars, thinkers who had their head in their correct place, they realized one thing and they wrote it repeatedly, that democracy, if Hindus are not careful, democracy will be their biggest enemy, because it's just a game of numbers. Character, competence, nothing will matter in a game of numbers. So they warned this repeatedly. They gave repeated warnings from everyone, Lala Lajpat Roy up to D.V. Gundappa. They warned this repeatedly.
Well,
So
that seems to be happening in the West as well.
yeah,
In fact,
correct.
it's
Demo
very easy to it's easier to subvert democracy than any other system.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Look at what happened
Democracy.
in Afghanistan. This is nothing but
See,
subversion.
correct. See, the point is simple. Taliban was just lying in wait. These guys decamped. So nature abhors a vacuum. So it is filled by these barbarians. So that is a lesson. Look, this is what Sitaram Goel said. Okay, no matter how strong or how perfect or how stable a system is, Nothing can withstand the onslaught of a determined army of gangsterism motivated by religion. No force on earth can withstand this. The recent example, like you said, is Afghanistan. It is determined, organized gangsterism. There are no rules. There's only smash, grab, capture. They're all mini Mahmud of Ghaznis.
Yes, but then as I think somebody said that if you remain politically correct and if you do not confront the ideology and if you do not design measures and methods
Yes.
to contain, not just contain, actually to destroy that ideology,
Yes.
then destruction will be yours.
Yes, absolutely.
So you have to come out of that
Hmm.
apologetic stance,
Correct.
and you have to confront it head on, which doesn't seem to
There
be
is no other go. There is no other go.
that doesn't
You
seem to be possible in a democracy. So
no point. No,
maybe
it's not possible. No, it's not possible. Well, I mean, it is possible because see, every system is made of people, right? When you say institutional memory, who institution is not just building. Somebody will take the decision, no, to run it. That that is the whole point here. That you keep shifting the blame to what you call lifeless buildings and systems. Everybody is to blame except the person. No, that is why our culture, our dharma has laid primacy on the individual.
well, I think that takes us to the larger question whether this kind of a parliamentary democracy is devoid of dharma was the
Hmm.
best prescription for India. But
Hmm.
I think that's for some other time.
Yeah.
And now I think it's time that we go to the questions and answers from the audience.
Okay.
So let me request all our viewers to please like this video, share it around, also to subscribe to the channel, press the bell icon, and also please go down to the description and see that we have a contribution link there. We also added what is called subscriptions, both for India as well as for international. We have domestic plans as well as international plans. Then we've also added PhonePe. PayTM was already there. The number is there on which it can be done. Okay, so questions and answers. Algebra. Please also do story on Drome or gypsies in Europe. These people left westward after Islamic invasions. Almost all of them were low caste Hindus. You like to take this? It was not exactly related to the topic.
I mean, it is a request for you to do an episode on this. That's my understanding. So perhaps you can call an expert on this topic.
Okay. Algebra again. South India will be Christendom soon.
Well, large parts of it are already. Again, not a question. Hmm.
No, of course, it does relate to the consciousness, but there
It
doesn't
does.
seem to be a consciousness.
It
That,
does.
that, that this seems to be happening. It's
Actually,
happening in a very subtle methods.
it's a good observation. Actually, we can do a separate episode on this. Why South India has become, the new. I would not say new, but the latest hub for mass spread of Christianity compared to uh, the rest of the country. We can do a separate show on this. It's a great point, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Next. TSJ Guruji Sandeep Ji Pranam. As Sadhguru claimed, the Indian culture is a godless culture, but we have divine entities, and there has never been an idea of God. I'm confused. Kindly enlighten us in this
No, not
regard.
possible in such a short span. But I have a small request or advice, suggestion, whatever, however you want to take it. Kindly stick to your traditional practices. Worship your stone gods. Okay, worship. If you are affiliated to some kind of a temple or kuldevata or some matha, you have a favorite spot for going to tirtha kshetra. Please follow that. Do not follow these whatever swayambhus who have become gurus.
Well, just an observation, because I have been to the Sadguru ashram.
Hmm.
So, what goes on there in the ashram,
Mm.
well, that doesn't square up with this statement.
Precisely my point. Precisely my point.
Because you have Shiva and you have Bhairavi and you have every kind of temple over there.
Right.
But then outside he says this. So,
Yeah. I say so. Yeah. Please follow your traditional acharyas and gurus. Even the pujari in your neighborhood. He knows far more Sanatana Dharma than all of these guys put together.
okay, Varintalam Sandeep ji, as per history, Jayapal and Anandapal had repelled three attacks from the Turks before the eventual fall of Kabul. Is this true? If so, why did they learn from their enemy? Why did they not learn from their enemy? Did Jayapal commit suicide after the fall of Kabul?
Yeah, yes, Jaipala did commit suicide because he was defeated and his entire army was humiliated. And this is the other point. Okay, none of the Hindu kings who fought with each other humiliated the enemy during defeat. Very few exceptions. Okay, the vanquished king would be his kingdom would be restored back to him with full honors on the condition that he agreed to accept the victor's overlordship. As simple as that. Just a submission was enough. Jaipala, the treatment of Jaipala was, I mean, extraordinary humiliation. We won't go into that. But Jayapala resisted Mahmud for quite some time. I won't say, he defeated Mahmud exactly. He didn't, really drive him away, but he instilled enough fear in Mahmud, not to attempt repeated wars, like he did later. So that way, yes, he didn't actually repel him, but he kept the defenses extremely strong. And he realized with great foresight that, this was a different kind of a beast. Mahmud type of people who would, the kind of war they waged, that is a different kind of, he was not used to, Hindus were not used to this kind of war. So he realized that, they have to be destroyed root and branch. And so he, in order to preempt this guy, unfortunate, I mean, I'm very moved when I speak of Jaipala. So he took his own initiative and went after Ghazni in order to capture it, in order to kill Mahmud. If only he had a contingent of support base of at least 3 or 4 major Hindu kingdoms in India, the story would have been completely different. So anyway, Anandapala kept his that banner of that spirit of revolt alive, but rest is history. So yes, he also committed suicide. Jaipala committed suicide. Next.
Next. मनीष, इतिहास से एक ही बात सीखना है और वह है हतो वा प्राप्स्य स्वर्गम जित्वा वा भोक्ष्यसे महीम तस्मादुत्तिष्ठ कौन्तेय युद्धाय कृत निश्चयः.
Okay, correct. Next.
मनीष, दुश्मन जहाँ मिले जैसे मिले किसी भी अवस्था में मिले दुश्मन का खात्मा.
Okay, next.
श्रवण, greatest lesson from history of survival is to empower everyone to fight both by wisdom and weapon. There should be mandatory training. Farmers continuing to farm while war is on is a great way to commit suicide of civilization intellectually and physically.
Well, you want to take this?
I would say that you have to contextualize everything.
Precisely.
There was a time when the war was fought honorably And at that time, it was perfectly fine for the farmers to continue farming while the combatants were fighting. But to continue with that, when the nature of the beast had changed, the nature of the war had changed, that would then be considered suicidal. So the comment doesn't apply to the time of Megasthenes. It does
Yeah.
apply to the time of Mahmud of Ghazni.
Yes. Next.
Next, Govind Mudaliar, please explain Tamil versus Sanskrit. That's not the topic, Govind. Not today. That's not the topic. Let's stick to the topic, please. Ratan Sheena, Pranam, both of you, sir. After independence, the Islamist and Marxist historians did the maximum harm. Hindus also never translated their horrific memoirs to the next generation. Please share your thoughts.
Okay. Good one. Uh, a couple of areas of confusion. Okay, but first we'll get the basics right. Okay, don't call them Marxist historians. Don't use these two words in the same breath. You're a historian or you're a Marxist. You cannot be both. Okay, that is one. Now that we have got that out of the way, yes, they did maximum damage and all that. That is well known. Okay. Your second point that Hindus also never translated their horrific memories, not memoirs. Okay. This is largely incorrect. In fact, Hindus have left behind although not substantial, although not to the extent that we want, they have left behind many accounts of the sufferings that they've undergone. It's not that they're there, they're just scattered in, because they've been written in multiple languages. Okay, and they're they haven't become mainstream. You have to, they still exist. For example, in Rajasthan, where Mr. Dixit lives, the Jain libraries maintained there, that is a gold mine for Hindu history, especially medieval Hindu and Muslim history. So these are all written in Prakrit or other local dialects, Hindi, uh, uh, other scripts, but nevertheless they are Bharatiya Bhasha. They exist. If you want to read these accounts, they are still available in the archives. Go to National Archives in Delhi. You will find these accounts in various journals, in various books. It is there. They have left behind these things.
Next.
Although you can't fully reconstruct them, but if you have enough patience and if you have perseverance, you can read these things and you can get a very clear picture of what had happened.
Next one.
Yeah.
Sanjeet Mishra, terrific initiative this in bringing a weekly episode with Sandeep. JD as a platform is growing in stature. Congratulations to both and good luck. Thank you, Sanjeet ji. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Congrats, Sanjay ji.
Congrats to you. Next one. Rianchalam Sandeep ji, what happened at Raichur was a mistake. Hindu kings never sacked any town under Muslim control. If this was done a few times, do you think history would be different?
Yeah,
The
I
only
already
instance that I remember was Suhail Dev who did that.
Yeah, no, I answered that. No, already. If only Jayapala had succeeded in capturing and killing Mahmud, things would have been totally different. You're talking about something that happened more than 600 years after that.
Next. Mr. Kripton Sandeepji, in this world full of mediocrity, you and Dharma Dispatch shine bright like the sun. Thank you.
My God, thank you. It's quite poetic.
Mr. Kripton, again, I feel you're doing a disservice by not bringing DD in video format. Please give it a
Dharma
thought.
Dispatch. No, I'm not a big video person. Sir. I mean, plus there's a lot of work going on. But thanks for the suggestion. Maybe we'll consider that at a later time. Yeah.
Also, more Kannada translations.
Okay. Okay, that's on the cards.
Next, Talam Sandeepji, why did Jayapal and Anandapal not get support from the other kings after the first attack and the sack of the outer regions of Gandhara? I think it was cause for sufficient alarm.
Yeah, well, I think I've already.
Sad really to see the
during the
our
course
gonna become Afghan Taliban. Conversion is giving us enemies from within.
Mm. Well, I think I've already explained this, right, during the course of the conversation. Anandapala got support in his second, major battle against Mahmud. Anandapala did get support.
Next.
Yeah.
Achintya Saxena. In my personal experience, most leading Marxist academics in North India were disenfranchised zamindars who lost jagirs after land reforms. Opinion? Well, I
I
haven't
have no
studied.
clue.
I haven't studied
This,
their genealogies.
this has no answer. I'm sorry. I mean, it's beyond my.
But maybe it's a suggestion.
It's a
It's a
suggestion.
good
Perhaps.
cue. It's a
Yeah, yeah,
good cue maybe to understand their genealogies.
yeah, yeah. Perhaps it's worth. This phenomenon is worth examining. Yeah.
Yes.
Good you brought
Next.
this up. Yeah.
Yes. गुड क्यू
Yeah.
आकाश पाटिल
Akash Patil.
विजयनगर और गजपति दोनों सम्राट ने अपने पुत्र पुत्री एक दूसरे को ब्याह कर भी दोनों साम्राज्य एक होकर
Hmm.
जिहादी विदेशी लुटेरों के विरुद्ध क्यों न लड़ पाए.
Wahi, loss of Aryavarta consciousness, lack of proper identification of the Turushka monster. It's the same answer.
Next. Okay, so that brings us to the close of this episode. Very good first episode with Sandeep ji, and we will have 4 more such episodes every Tuesday, 7 p.m. Please put it in your calendar. Thank you, Sandeep ji, and thank you, viewers. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.
Vande Mataram. My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. All the best to Jaipur Dialogues. Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram.